Hello. Thank you for tuning in today. My name is Kathleen Nishida. I'm the chair of the Health Equity Anti-Racism Committee of the Pennsylvania affiliate of the ACNM. We've been meeting for a year now, and the core work of our committee thus far has been the development of a scholarship fund that will significantly support the development of midwives of color. We anticipate that this is a long-term project that will generate not only funding, but also traditions and rich history that we will celebrate going forward. One of the operating principles of our committee is that the burden of anti-racism work shouldn't fall on the shoulders of people of color. In our profession, midwives of color have a minority presence. As such, they are constantly being asked to represent. Indeed, the majority of the members of the HERE committee are individuals who identify as Black, Indigenous, or people of color. They're here because they have a vested interest in dismantling racist trends in the production of midwives in the United States. Listen to the voices of some of our committee members as they encourage your participation in our capital campaign.
On June 2nd, 2020, shortly following the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis, Minnesota, the ACNM released a statement regarding Black lives in the Commonwealth. The statement reads in part, "We must recognize the role racism plays in every aspect of our lives, in our clinical practice, and in the lives of the people we serve. And we must acknowledge the painful truth that lies at the origin of American midwifery. As a result of pervasive racism and patriarchy, midwifery in the U.S. has been stripped of the knowledge and wisdom of the grand midwives and parteras, who are Black and Indigenous midwives of color, leaving midwifery in the United States today largely a white profession. The ACNM not only advocates for Black people in our care, but we also remain steadfast in our commitment to foster a more diverse next generation of midwives, with an imperative to support Black midwives in the Commonwealth." These words were just the beginning. The board followed by committing to the following actions towards safety and health equity for all: financial support, engagement, leadership, anti-racism work, and the formation of the Health Equity and Anti-Racism Committee, the HERE Committee. In March 2021, the Health Equity and Anti-Racism Committee held its first meeting, where it affirmed its focus squarely on racism, the root cause of health inequities that threatens and impacts mortality and morbidity for all childbearing people in Pennsylvania and around the country. Today, the HERE Committee informs the actions of ACNM at every level and has prioritized starting its work by number one, supporting the work of establishing educational scholarships for Black Indigenous midwives of color through the Emerging Pennsylvania Fund, and number two, determining the best ways to support Black Indigenous midwives of color in our membership and leveraging committee work to make systemic change in Pennsylvania midwifery. This month marks 1 year since our formation. Please join us.
Did you know the African American maternal mortality rate in the U.S. is 3 times that of their counterparts? The midwifery profession is over 90% white. Midwives attend only 11% of births in the U.S., 45% of those births to Black Indigenous women of color. The Pennsylvania Maternal Mortality Review of 2021 reported that pregnancy-associated mortality ratios for non-Hispanic whites was 79 per 100,000 live births. For non-Hispanic Blacks, the ratio was 163 per 100 live births, 2 times that of non-Hispanic whites. 30% of Black and Hispanic women who deliver in a hospital report provider mistreatment. Only 21% of white women report provider mistreatment. Minority students are more likely to attend colleges and universities that are for-profit. This requires higher student loan utilization that widens the economic gap and increases debt. Studies also show that minorities are more likely to serve communities of the underserved. This greatly and positively impacts the communities that experience health disparities. Student midwives of color often report lack of representation from faculty and students, concerns with discussing issues within their communities, and lack of support from midwifery programs. We call on you to act.
We call on you to participate as contributors. Consider the specific ways that you have benefited from white supremacy within the context of midwifery in Pennsylvania. You have likely benefited from white supremacy if, during your midwifery education, you did not have any difficulty finding classmates, instructors, and preceptors who shared your background and clinical care settings that reflected your lived experience. If you don't have any hesitation in recommending that family members and friends come to your practice for care, or if you can easily find another midwifery practice to recommend to them. If you have no problem finding professional mentors and peers that you can relate with. If you feel comfortable bringing up ideas for changes in your professional practice or being heard and taken seriously when you have a concern. If you have rarely felt isolated or alone in a large group of midwives. Please give what you can.
The current average tuition of midwifery education in Pennsylvania is roughly about $84,000. Factor in the average living expenses of about $23,000 for a 2 to 3 year program, and you can see the financial investment to heed the call to midwifery is massive. In fact, without the benefits of privilege and generational wealth, bearing the financial burden can be impossible for some. The Pennsylvania affiliate and the HERE committee are determined to mitigate this burden for systemically excluded and marginalized student midwives by continuing to lead among state affiliates by creating a model that can be replicated nationally. We are establishing an endowed scholarship with the assistance from the ACNM Foundation. We have organizational commitment on the local and national levels. The intention is that this endowed scholarship will grow annually with sustaining contributions. Our affiliate has already pledged up to $10,000 for the initial funding of the endowment. The number of students identifying as Black, Indigenous, or people of color that we can award is directly connected to your willingness to reach back and lend meaningful financial support to aspiring midwives. As Dr. King said, we are confronted with the fierce urgency of now. Join us.
The HERE Committee and the PA affiliate of ACNM recognize that we're part of a profession built on the disenfranchisement of Black midwives, Indigenous midwives, and other midwives of color. We are long overdue in taking steps towards reparation. It is time for those of us who benefit from systemic racism and white supremacy to stand up and do our part. Join us in funding this scholarship to improve the equity and diversity of our profession and to increase access to much-needed culturally congruent care for the individuals and families that we serve.
In this final segment of the video, I want to speak with you about becoming a contributor to the scholarship fund. As we kick off the capital campaign, we will be approaching many different types of potential donors, but we envision that the mainstay of this campaign will be Pennsylvania midwives. I especially want to ask white midwives to commit to being a sustaining donor at the level of 1% of your salary. Our intention is to continue to support the scholarship fundraising until such time that diversity among Pennsylvania midwives mirrors the population that we care for. I want to point out to you, if you haven't been a victim of systemic racism, then by default you have benefited from it. This is an opportunity for reparation and restoration. Being a sustaining contributor to the HERE Midwives of Color Scholarship Fund offers an opportunity to support the diversification of the midwifery workforce in Pennsylvania. We will all gain from increased diversity as more midwives of color bring their skills, leadership, and wisdom to our workplaces and our lives. The people of Pennsylvania who we care for will benefit from increased access to midwives of color as care providers, role models, mentors, and expert practitioners. Please follow the instructions at the end of the video to proactively add your name to our mailing list via either the Google form or our email. Thank you very much.